And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce former colleague, reproductive justice rock star, Eesha Pandit.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so nervous. Bear with me. I'm so glad to be here at this conference, which always will remain, my favorite social justice event of the year. The mandate of the CLIP conference is huge: to build a broad-based movement for reproductive justice with that enables people from other movements to work in solidarity with each other. That word gets tossed around quite a bit, solidarity. People post it on their Facebook pages all the time, they tweet it, they sign their emails with it, like XOXO, solidarity, Eesha. So this morning, I want to ask all of us to think really hard about what solidarity means and why it's important that we understand how to act in solidarity. Notice that I said act because I don't think that solidarity is a sentiment. It's not a feeling. It's an approach, a strategy, a value system that influences what I do, not just what I feel. It's how I show up for you and how you show up for me. So I'll take a step back now and talk about one of the issues that I've spent my most recent days working on, which is to engage men to join the movement to end violence against women. And before we determine the solutions, I think, to that problem, we have to name the problem. So the first question for me is, what is the function of violence? What causes violence? What sustains it? Given that we know that the majority of violence against women occurs at the hands of men, and that the majority of violence against men occurs at the hands of men, we have some questions to answer and to ask. Is there something in masculinity or masculine identity that accepts, if not encourages, violence? This begs the question, is masculinity itself violent? Is there a way to be a man or masculine without being violent? I absolutely think that we have to challenge patriarchal structures and heteronormative belief systems if we're going to answer these questions. But the first things first, we're going to fail at answering those questions if we think of violence as merely a symptom of something else. If you've listened over the past few weeks and months to the NRA press conferences, you might be led to believe that the perpetration of violence is some elusive phenomenon committed by the criminally insane or at the behest of video games or violent movies. If you watch some of the news coverage of the Delhi gang rape story in India, you would hear a lot of speculation that the young men who perpetrated that act must have been on drugs. I wholeheartedly disagree with this assessment of violence. It is not a tragic happenstance. It is not something done only by those who have lost their right minds. Violence is functional. It is a means of asserting and securing power. When violence targets women in the dark of the night, it ensures, amongst other things, that women stay out of the streets. When violence against trans women goes largely unreported in studies of violence against women more broadly, it is tacitly legitimated. When violence against white school children raises a national furor and violence against an innocent black teenager wearing a hoodie doesn't provoke a national conversation about legislating guns, we can see the fault lines. When a football player kills his partner and then himself, and we find ourselves knowing his name but not hers, we see which victims matter. Violence is functional, and our response to that violence is also functional. Violence functions by silencing those whom it targets. Let us not forget that most cases of rape and sexual assault go unreported. Let us not forget the stigma that survivors face. Whether it is perpetrated by an individual or by the state, violence has an aim: to remove power and instill fear. Our job is to counter that fear with an intersectional analysis and, yes, with solidarity. Here's what solidarity can enable us to do. It can enable us to recenter the voices of the most marginalized amongst us: women of color, poor women, trans women, people who are gender nonconforming, undocumented people. Challenging traditional definitions of who are legitimate victims and who deserve our support and protection is what solidarity looks like. Solidarity can enable us to push back on criminal justice-based solutions to violence, really push back hard, because we know that reliance on the criminal justice and legal system for creating safety means only safety for some and not safety for all. We have to get into our communities and create and sustain community-based responses to violence. That is what solidarity looks like. Solidarity also enables us to explore our shared histories of oppression and to do so with an intersectional lens. Violence does not happen in a vacuum. We take on the questions of racism, sexism, classism, nationalism, homophobia, and transphobia so that we can best address the violence happening in our communities and across the country and the world. As you can see, the sites for the battle for access to reproductive health care and to prevent violence in our communities are not dissimilar. The same structures are at play. Violence against women is created and sustained by the twin scourges of patriarchy and colonialism, and I dare say that those have something to do with reproductive oppression as well. For more about how that works, you're going to have to come to our Occupy the Patriarchy workshop this week. My point is that we have legitimate grounds for collective action, for strategic coalitions, for mutually constructed agendas. We have so much space to act in solidarity. So as you all attend the myriad of conference workshops this weekend and you learn lots of things and hear from experts and leaders, ask yourselves, ask them, ask each other, how can I act in solidarity with you?